I want to begin just by saying I'm very sorry for your loss. No one should have to experience such a terrible event as the loss of their children in a violent accident. You've talked about bouncing back, and it should be acknowledged that with a trauma like this, bouncing back is tough to define. You may have some recovery, but something of this scope, I think, and magnitude is going to alter anyone's life, probably in a permanent way. And maybe that's okay. I don't think you want to entirely bounce back in the sense of leaving this behind entirely, because you can't leave an event like this behind you entirely, and maybe you shouldn't. So let's talk about what we can do to help you to process and metabolize your grief and trauma. The main thing here to stress is that it's up to you how you want to process this. We need to give you the time you need. There's no schedule here that can be imposed on you. And we also need to permit you to have the full range of feelings attached to this trauma. I say that because a lot of feelings are taboo in our culture. If something like this, where you experience a terrible loss, typically the expectation is that you'll feel sadness, that somehow that is the only feeling, the only acceptable feeling. But in fact, there's a full range of feeling. There may be fear, there may be hurt, and most importantly, because it's sort of the gatekeeper and the most taboo feeling, it is anger. And I think that's probably what's producing the depression that you're describing, is your anger. It is perfectly natural, perfectly acceptable to simply feel angry that this terrible, terrible thing has happened to you, that it didn't happen to someone else, or that it just simply that it happened at all, and that if it were to happen at all, it would have to happen to you. That this perfectly innocent person, you, living your life, and something terrible somehow was chosen to happen in your life and to be so destructive and to bring so much loss and so much grief. Yes, it's normal and appropriate to feel angry. And that anger, if it isn't given anywhere to go, can turn inward. You can blame yourself for going to anger instead of going to these more appropriate, more acceptable feelings. And that is what produces depression. Now, you've talked about your therapist proposing medication for the depression. I think we can acknowledge right away that that may be helpful to relieve symptoms in the short term, unless the depression is very, very severe. I would be hesitant to go to medication simply because in the long term, it isn't really going to address the underlying issue of depression. What we need to do here is allow you on your own schedule to feel whatever it is that you feel, whatever those feelings are, including ugly feelings that may be difficult for you to put into words, that might not feel appropriate, that might not feel acceptable, rage and anger and hatred and just, why did this happen to me? Why do I have to suffer this terrible loss? And you've mentioned Christmas as being a trigger for the depressive episodes. And I think, of course, that's entirely appropriate. Christmas is a time when family is celebrated above all else, gathering together. And I could imagine just being filled with rage as well as horror and grief and hurt and fear around Christmas time, having endured these events and these losses. I would say you have no agenda here. I would not impose any agenda on you. You will recover, you will bounce back if you wish to bounce back, when you wish to bounce back. But the best way to do that is to give you the space you need and permission to metabolize the full range of your emotional responses to these events.